Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for this bank of films that are on our closing day. And we're really excited to have this conversation with these three amazing filmmakers who really brought us some incredible stories, lots to think about, and lots to talk about. So let's get to that. And we're going to start with having a conversation with each one of the filmmakers who's going to tell us a little bit about their film and tell us sort of the inspiration behind making their film. So Danielle, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hey, I'm Danielle Ayow. I am the writer, director, and producer of But You Are Not Black. And the inspiration for this film kind of happened throughout my life and kind of growing up because I am Chinese Trinidadian. And so when I was younger and I used to tell people that I was Chinese Trinidadian, I got comments like, "But you're not black. Which parent is black? You don't look mixed." um, it was basically trying to imply or yeah, trying to imply that I had some level of blackness, or I had to have some level of blackness in order to be Trinidadian. And so as a result, I got so fed up with these answers that I was getting that I was like, I'm going to write a documentary one day that talks about the Chinese migration to the Caribbean. And then if anybody asks me these questions, I'm going to just show them this documentary. And that was what I kind of started out doing. And then it kind of evolved and changed and started talking more about, well, why do we have these preconceptions, and how do they end up damaging the person that you're telling these things to? So that is my documentary.
No, I know and it's interesting because it's true. I mean, we have society has told us how to identify people, right? And it's obviously not necessarily the right thing that people don't understand that history. And if you don't understand your history, then how are you going to move forward? And if you don't understand, and if other people don't understand that history, then they're asking questions, and that's fine, but then they're making assumptions, right? And for you, it's not only in the society as a whole, but also in the Trinidadian community, like, understanding for the Trinidadian community that, yeah, that there was this migration and this is what happened and this is how I identify. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, about identity and finding your identity and I think with the Bengali, we can have a really rich conversation about that as well. But I'm going to move to Yesenia. Yes, Jesse.
Jesse. Yeah, yeah. My name is Yesenia Rego. I created, well, along with some other women, the movie Through the Eyes of a Woman. And basically, I started out just going to the Dominican Republic when I was about 16, doing some work there. And my family is from the Dominican Republic. And about 2 or 3 years into me going every year, I started giving some of the women in these small villages in the area of Dominican called La Romana in the Bateyes, which are like little villages where sugarcane workers and their families live. I started just handing out little digital camcorders because they were always so fascinated by my cameras, and just started letting them record little bits of their own observations. And then this movie is kind of just a melting pot of my observations and theirs, and sort of just trying to put it together to give a good picture of what a day in the life as a woman in the Bateyes just looks like, and also just some general observations about their life and how they also relate to being known, being perceived, that sort of deal. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really beautiful to watch them, to have them really sort of giving them agency to tell their own story, and who they were and how you identify as Dominican, and sort of like showing that there's not a monolith, that there's this breadth of stories and women who are part of this space. And I mean, I just thought that it was really incredible to be able to have them do that. So now we go to the Bengali, which was sort of the feature with all your shorts. So, Kavery, do you want to talk a little bit about your film?
Sure. The Bengali is the story of a woman's search for her past. She's an African American writer who goes to India to search for her past. The story is of incredible significance to me because when I first came to this country as a child, people didn't even know where India was. And my mother said to me that, we're not the first Indians here. And that intrigued me. She said, you're not going to find it in the history books. I can't find it for you. So it was doubly intriguing that this was untold history. Later, when I met Fatima Sheikh and her family and the community in New Orleans and learned more about how the men from India who first came to the US married African-American women, I was thrilled. This was my history in this country at a time when immigrants have been demonized. It's a story of two communities that came together and led the way. And so I wanted to make this film that brought our communities together. It told the story of mine and it told the story of African Americans. And at the same time, really, it tells the story of America and global migrations. It should not be stuck in a category of its own, although it's that category that makes it rich and interesting.
Yeah, and Veronique's here from the Bengali as well. I want to have a deeper discussion about your choices and the journeys that you all have either taken your subjects on, or for Danielle, gone on yourself. But they're journeys for yourselves as well. And why was that so important for you and for your growth, maybe for your growth to tell these stories? Because I think for my growth, it's that I learned so much from all of your films, and I think as an audience member, I think that people felt the same way, right? Like, I didn't know about the history of the Bengali. I knew the history of South Asians in Trinidad, but not Chinese. And that's only because of friends that I have. And the story of the Dominican Republic is just so layered. So can you just talk about that, about your journey, about the journey of your folks, and about what you want us to sort of take away from that? And I'll start with Jessie.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I mean, when I first started out making this movie, I didn't have I don't want to say that I didn't have a plan. I just knew that I wanted these women who, some of them had never even touched a camera in their lives. I knew that I wanted them to sort of experience what it would be like to document things in their daily lives. And this is a place in the Dominican Republic that's it's pretty difficult to describe the feeling of weight that exists there, because that place is where sugarcane workers and their families live and are paid, I mean, less than nothing. They lose more than they gain just by being a part of that industry, unfortunately. And so the women are often simply there to take care of domestic duties, which you find in the film. There's a big separation between what their responsibilities are and what they've been given, and truly what they need and what they aspire to and what they want. And so basically that was my journey there. I had already known this fact about their lives, but I felt strange, even though I am Dominican, I felt strange telling a story of especially Black Dominicans, Black Haitians in the Bateyes. It's a very different existence than that of people who live in the capital, in Santo Domingo, in La Romana. It's a whole different world. So I'm losing my train of thought here, but basically, I just really wanted a way for them to also have a way to contribute to the story, because they own a perspective that I could never possibly have. And so by being able to include their own footage, I thought that was a way of me even better understanding their own situation, because there's just no way that I could translate that for other people in the way that they could tell it themselves, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, and that completely came across. I mean, giving the women the opportunity to take the cameras and sort of tell their story from their perspective is powerful. I mean, I think that anytime that you're sort of unearthing other people's plight and other people's lives from their own perspective, it really gives us that sense of understanding of what people are going through. Danielle, your story is autobiographical. It's your story. It's your journey. And, you know, I think of it a lot about the Bengali journey as well. It's sort of like really figuring out who you are in this place that's not necessarily accepting who you are. So can you, from both spaces, maybe, I don't know, can you talk a little bit about that journey and what that journey has done to you, like this film, how this film has, you know, given you that sense of, I don't know, belonging in a space that you have to constantly explain to people?
You know what? I don't know if it necessarily gave me more of a sense of belonging, but I not to spoil the movie, but it is inconclusive by the end of it. It is inconclusive, and that's just because the way that global migration happens and the way that we describe other people and the way we interact with ethnicity and race and culture and the way we describe it is just going to constantly keep on evolving. And so and I feel like this idea of testing people and testing whether you're authentic, testing whether you belong is unfortunately always going to be part of the conversation. But in terms of the journey and the progress of this film, when I originally set out, I was determined to share the history of the Chinese migration. And so I started doing lots of research. I said, what research is out there? What exists? And there was tons. There was tons of research. It was well documented. Well, not well documented, but it was documented. There are other films out there talking about this particular chunk of time. And so I was like, so what's the problem? Why am I having this issue? What is this problem? Because this knowledge exists. And the answer was, well, I needed to go out and figure out, well, why are people still having issues about this? Is it me? Is it them? Is it the system? Is it, am I describing myself incorrectly? And so I went out searching for this community, and I just realized that although the community existed, we all described ourselves so vastly different based on, you know, our age, based on the country we lived in, and how they saw multiculturalism and they saw color. And so it became more frayed, I think, actually, as it went on. So that was my journey, I guess.
And but you're still on that journey. I mean, because you're on that journey every day, explaining who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. You know, as people of color, who don't necessarily fit into a particular space, but understand where we're coming from. We're for me, anyway, you constantly ask, well, what are you? Where are you? Where are you from? And who are you? So this journey and this conversation, you know, continues. So Kavery, can you, the Bengali, you know, I felt so much similarity to all of that, to Danielle, to Jessie, and this history that you also unearthed. This was sort of this like historical as well. Can you talk about that journey, your journey, and part of this?
My journey was very complicated with a whole range of emotions. I was very excited to be going to India with Fatima. I was very concerned that for her family, this journey meant a lot, the culmination of generations of talking about a legendary grandfather. Now, what if we didn't find anyone there? What if we didn't find his land? What if we didn't find his village? So I was very concerned about that at times. And as the film made its twists and turns, obviously there were moments when I was fabulous, and there were other moments when I'd have to say, now what? So it was, you know, and for me, I felt a tremendous sense of responsibility because on the one hand, it was very exciting to have discovered a living proof, so to speak, of the history of my community in the global diaspora. On the other hand, I've grown up very connected to my Indianness, and that has given me enormous strength in the face of all the challenges I've faced. So I felt a tremendous responsibility because so many African Americans don't have that sense of connection to where they come from. And it's an awesome feeling of taking someone where they have a connection and hoping that something comes out of it. And then finding that it can be magical and good things can happen. And being able to say to the world, look, our communities have been close in the past. We can be close again. The times we live in, which normalize hatred, we don't need that. And so it was on many levels a very complicated film. And of course, I wanted to approach it from the point of view of the people that Fatima would encounter there. Because so often these films are, first of all, about a man on a quest. She's a woman on a quest, a white man on a quest. She's a woman of color on a quest. And then so often it's about the Westerners' journey into the East or another country or another continent, discovering what they have to discover. Well, that's all very well and good, but you arrive in a place where you've never been, your family hasn't been there for generations. Don't the people there have some thoughts about you? And I thought that's something I could bring to the film as someone who knows both cultures.
I think that you touched on something that I think all of you are like shaking your heads and saying. So one of the things that I noticed too in your film was that people were sort of like, what do you want? What do you want? Like, or are you going to take our land? Are you here to, like, what are you here to do? And I don't know if the two of you, like Danielle and Yesenia, like felt that too. Like for you, Danielle, like, what do you like? Why are you trying to say that you're Trinidadian? You must want something. For you, Kavery, it was like that they said that in the film. Like that was really interesting to me. And I don't know if Jesse was the same thing. Like, what do you want from us? You're coming in here. You're trying to expose us. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I felt like that in all of them was like, no, I'm just here to tell your history. I really want to give you agency and I want to help tell your story. But in the same sense, I think that people were apprehensive about what it was you wanted to do with their lives that might change them. So Danielle, did you feel that in your film? And then I'm going to jump back to Kavery and then.
It was a little bit of that, but it wasn't so much like, what do you want from us, as much as it was, I can be as Trinidadian as I think I can in Canada, and be into the food, be into the music, go to all festivals, celebrate holidays with my family. But at the end of the day, I'm not there. I didn't go to high school there. I didn't go to university there. I didn't grow up in that situation. So in my film, somebody does say to me, well, but you're not Trinidadian. This is your parents' past, but it's not yours. So it's that idea of, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word for it, but it's not so much what are you trying to take from us, but it's a completely different concept of what it is to be Trinidadian in US and Canada versus actually being Trinidadian in Trinidad, which I think is the case with a lot of countries, because you could be Scottish and you can celebrate traditions, eat foods, wear a kilt, and you can go to Scotland and they will probably be like, but you're not Scottish, you're Canadian. So it was a lot of that, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Very interesting. And so Jesse, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, there's obviously that. It's so funny, Danielle, because a lot of times I get that whenever I'm like, I'm Dominican, people are like,
right.
but you're not black. What? That doesn't make any kind of sense. So there definitely is some shared experience of that, and I think with a lot of Dominicans that I would tell once I was making this movie, oh, I'm Dominican, they're like, first of all, I call BS on that. But then I would be like, no, my family's from Santiago, and I would be able to tell them, and then they slowly got it, and we were able to have that shared experience. But at the same time, there is a sort of wariness, the fact that I am American. There is that separation. I mean, it wasn't the same. For me, it was less, I found in the Bengali, what I thought was so interesting was just that, like, the townspeople at first, I feel like their main fear was like recolonization, almost like the reintroduction of Christianity to that space, which is also a very valid thing in the DR, where a lot of Haitian Dominicans also are still practicing voodoo and these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So there was kind of like a fear that maybe my intention there was to also perhaps bring in Christianity, which was not my intention. But and then at some points, the men in the town were extremely apprehensive of me being there because I was completely alone. I didn't go with anyone. I didn't go with a sound person. I didn't go with a camera person. I was completely alone. And I just had somebody drive me into the villages every day. And there was, I think, a fear at some point that I was there to expose mistreatment of women in some way or get somebody in trouble, I think was like the fear for a lot of that. And so I had to keep explaining to them, like, no, I just want to be with you during your day. Like I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. I'm not trying to, like, I just want to be with you. I just want to see your life, that little slice of life. But again, and I couldn't at any point feel resentful or angry for that because, you know, for years, people who look like me have come in and torn those communities apart. I have no right to feel like, why are they so mad at me that I'm here?
Right.
I was an intruder in those moments. And so, but gaining the trust over a series of years, because I returned to that village for years until I actually started filming this film, gaining that trust was essential and letting them know that I did not have an alternative motive other than to tell a story, and it wasn't the story that was trying to villainize anybody. You know, that just wasn't the point. So yeah.
Yeah. Kavery.
Oh, I'd just like to add
Oh,
another dimension. What happened? Do you have me there?
Now we do. We lost you for a second.
Okay. So I wanted to add another dimension to that question discussing. You know, when I say we went to India, there are many parts of India. I myself was born in Kolkata, which is a big city. It's an urban atmosphere where people have traveled to the West. They've met Americans. They've met African Americans. And when we went to that was a different matter. They had never seen foreigners before. And by foreigners, they meant Fatima. They had never seen an African American before. And they did think of it in colonization terms because they could only remember a long time ago there were some British that came in to see something, and they were the landowners. They had no frame of reference. So it's two different contexts we're talking about. And I think that in the Bengali, what I thought it was important to bring out was when...
Wait, got to say that again. What was important to bring out was...
And the concerns of the people in the village about Fatima's arrival there and her search for her grandfather's land, because they were way too polite to confront her about it, but they did confide in me a lot. And their concerns are rooted in their reality. And that's what we often don't see. We do see the perspective of a Westerner going in and saying, how ridiculous. I'm not here to do this. I'm not here to stay. But why would you come? What is the spiritual quest you've come on 150 years after someone died? What does that mean? So I wanted to show the two different perspectives and show audiences the validity of each perspective and how they can come together.
Yeah. And so did you all make your films for yourself or did you make them for other people?
Well, I can say I made my film for myself, for my children, for my family, both here in India and elsewhere, for Fatima's family. But of course, it's for everyone else too, because I do think it appeals to, it's a story of significance to the communities in the film, the African Americans, the South Asian story of significance to anyone who has a story of migration in their family, anyone who has a grandfather. So
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm
think,
open to everyone seeing it because I think our stories.
and I think, yeah, and I'll let Danielle and Jesse answer that too. But I mean, I'm not asking like who'd you make this film for, but I mean, I think we make films that are obviously about us, that are near and dear to us, that we want to help tell a story. But I feel like you're all making these stories too to help the conversation, to create the conversation, to bring light to darkness, for and that darkness being us not necessarily understanding these things, these cultures, this, immigration, migration, like all of these stories, because we only, so much of our media is one perspective, right? So I'd love for you all to also answer that question. And it wasn't like who'd you make it for? It was really, you know, what were you thinking about? Like, what did you want to happen after you finished your film and you got it out there in the world? So Danielle.
I I wanted people to watch the film and be like, and think about the fact that there's diversity within the diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just one shade and we all have the exact same story of immigration and the exact same trials and tribulations. And also talk about, because as global migration evolves and it's just, well, it's always been prevalent, people are not going to look the way that you think they should. You know, I was often very saddened about, I'm a big soccer fan, and I was very saddened when, people of color got heckled
Mm-hmm.
in games in Europe because of their skin color. And it's like, well, but these people are French, these people are Belgium, and they're playing for your national teams, and you're heckling them because of their color. And it's just, people are not, they're not going to look the way that you think they look anymore. And you have to be understanding about that. And when you start realizing that, and you start realizing about the diversity within the diverse, then you realize that you have way more in common with somebody who doesn't look like you, which is an important lesson, because we think somehow skin color separates us and makes us
Mm-hmm.
way more different than you or you. It's like, that's just ludicrous. That's what I made it for. So I'm not sure who that didn't answer your question.
Well, you made it for both. You made it for a larger audience. You made it for yourself. I mean, to have this, to go through this sort of like journey for yourself, but also other people, that whether you're right, people migrated to places in America that people don't even know about, and we only hear so much of American history. We don't hear the deeper parts of American history and the people who actually made America what it was.
Yeah.
And same with the Caribbean, countries.
But something I will add to this, sorry, Lisa, I know this wasn't the original answer to the question of actually who are you making it for? But I did realize early on that, unfortunately, the people who really should be watching the film, not should, but the people who could benefit from watching this film, and these films like the Bengali and Jesse's film, are not watching these films because they don't care, unfortunately. Like, I did get trolled early on when I was making this film and we were still in production, and people were like, oh, it's more multicultural hooey. and all this kind of nonsense. And so unfortunately, you know, who am I making this film for? It's almost like I'm preaching to the choir.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that has something to do with how these films are presented to those who may not be open or have the curiosity about other cultures. They're told this is a Trinidadian film or an Indian film or a Dominican film. Whereas, yes, they're all that, but I'm not told often to go see a film because it's a white film. I'm just told to go see the film. So I think to reach audiences that don't have a special interest in our subjects, they have to be told, go see the film. Think of it in terms of the story it tells, because it's your story too. And I mean that very strongly because I've learned a lot from films that don't have me in them. So I think other people can too.
Oh, absolutely. It's unfortunate though that it doesn't always happen that way.
But I think it's important then for films to be in festivals, for films to be in all different types of festivals, so that and paired together, so that there are films about journey. Like this is a series about journeys, about individual journeys, about giving women agency to tell their story, about storytelling, so that when you put them all together in this block, like we did, people can be like, oh my gosh, right? Sort of like our shared stories program with the Latino International Film Festival and the Asian American Film Festival here in Boston, to say you are more alike than you are not, right? And this is how we're going to tell you that. This is how we're going to show you that this is really about culture. This is about journey. This is about you can see yourself in this particular space. And I think with your films, like you can absolutely see that. I mean, for Danielle, you're not Black. I mean, I get that too, and it's true. And but it's sort of like, your films help us understand how you navigated that. Right. So I'm looking at your films and I'm saying, how did they navigate that? How did they navigate going back to India and going into these villages? How did you navigate, making sure that these voices of these women in the Dominican Republic were told? Because there might be others that can benefit from that and go on that journey as well.
And I
you do have to address the fact that you're different when you get there. I'm sorry, very quickly. When Fatima arrives there, it has to be clear that she is different. She is a cultural blend that is different from the villagers who've lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years, generation after generation. And there are different faiths, different perspectives on the world, and how do they come together? And they have to work through their curiosities, fears, and suspicions in order to be able to come together. And that's what I think we need more of. Just an openness to those differences, not just as something to be brushed over, but as something to be addressed and to be honest about in a genuine way.
I have a question for both of you. At any point in your films, did Fatima or yourself, Jessie, did you ever feel like you were Jessie and Fatima, you were home? Like you felt like you were part of this, that this was part of you? Or did you always perpetually feel like a little bit of a disconnect and a little bit like it's something familiar, but still not a piece of you?
I think it's something that takes a long time to absorb and process. One journey can't come up with the answers to that. I think my understanding is that, obviously there are huge differences. Here's a woman from an urban culture, from an African-American neighborhood, from a professional background. So there are huge differences from a different faith. All these things cause a disconnect of wonder, a disconnect of questioning. Well, but what about my grandfather? How does the puzzle work? So I think does lead to an immense openness, an immense joy at acceptance. And it will take time to process and figure out.
Mm.
For myself, I feel like I wouldn't have made this movie if I didn't feel an intense belonging in some way. Although I think many could argue that I had absolutely no place to be in the Bateyes. I feel like it's because of my persistence, and mind you, my persistence wouldn't have really existed had I not already felt some sense of belonging. But my persistence in returning to that same exact Batey, because there's hundreds of Bateyes in the Dominican Republic, and I kept returning to the same one over the course of 5 years, and I think my reasoning for that, and there's a part in the movie, because at the very end, I include something that Ingrid, who is featured in the movie sometimes, although she's not named. I tried not to name too many people for many reasons, but mostly like protection, just for them while they're over there. But she asks me, when you leave, will you still remember my face? Because I think there was a fear at some point, and she wrote me that in a letter. And I think that there is fear at some point that I was there to retrieve something and leave and forget about those people forever or something. But there in that scene, I overlay that voiceover of me washing dishes with her, which is a very big deal because in the Dominican Republic they never let me do anything. Which I'm not sure why, but it's this fear, I think, because of the othering, but they didn't want me to do dishes. They didn't want me to try to help to cook. They were like, no, don't ever. So when I insisted, when I would be like, no, you just made me a meal. I'm going to help you clean up. That's just the way things work. I want to do that for you. When I insisted, it was, I think it was sort of kind of forcing myself in the ring. And when they saw, well, at least she can scrub a dish. Like when they realized that, I think they sort of started to ease up around me and started to be like, well, maybe she's not as different as we thought that she possibly was. So I think for me, I definitely felt a sense of belonging while being very aware that the differences on every level, not even culturally, but aesthetically, like in every regard, were present and palpable. But I still feel such an intense connection to everybody who lives in Batey 106. And that's the reason why I wanted to make the movie. I'm like, I just love these people. And I want other people to know why I love these people. That's just it.
And what about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I definitely felt home, but like I mentioned before, and like Jessie just said, you recognize the differences, and you recognize that you can never truly feel how they feel, or never truly know how they feel, and I can feel home all I want, but at the end of the day, like I said, some locals, not just in Trinidad, like everywhere around the world, are going to be like, what the heck is she doing here? She's Canadian. She's American.
I think the differences continue, as in any family. People are from one another. There's nothing wrong with differences. I think it's the connection that's made that's very valuable. Even in terms of my crew, in India, I worked with a crew of Americans, which means all kinds of Americans, including Indian Americans, and Indians, local Indians. And will they work together again? I don't know, but there was a connection. There was a tremendous sadness when the American crew left. And it's that connection that I think is important and ongoing, because it stays in your heart, even if you're different.
Yeah. And I think that comes through with all of your films. You can see that you're connecting with these cultures that are yours, that are part of who you are, and wanting to dig deeper into those connections and being part of that. And I think that all your stories help us think about our own connections. Like for me would be my Native American culture, my Asian culture, and sort of like, really understanding, what are those connections and how do I strengthen those connections? And and that's important for all of us in our history and going forward. And like I said before, we need to know where we came from. We need to, in order to go forward, in order to help others also understand who we are. Even you're American walking into, just being an American walking into another place is is a whole other thing. And with that comes all sorts of responsibility and misunderstanding. But I really feel strongly that your films will help, and have helped at least me see, the importance of that, the importance of connection, the importance of documenting that, and the importance of sharing your stories so that other people can see themselves in those stories. So we are going to have to end here. Unfortunately, we could talk forever just about these issues, especially women and going in, and you going in by yourself. But I just want to thank you for your storytelling. I want to thank you for your voice and bringing other voices forward. I think it's just so important for you all as filmmakers to continue your journey, so that we can see ourselves in you. And that to me is what's really exciting, and what we love to do at RoxFilm, to bring those stories forward.
Thank you, Lisa, for your support of our work. It means a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
For having us.
And we'll continue to support your work wherever you're going, following you on social and all those things, so that we can help continue the work that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you very much. And we will talk soon, I'm sure, or see each other soon. Or you all will at some other festival see each other soon. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.